Join me on a journey through time to a place that you're not going to need your scuba gear for, because I've got you covered. It's got friendly fish and crocodiles alike, with of course the occasional visitor like myself joining in on the fun. It's a place that took millions of years to form, and we're still learning about its systems, all of which are totally unique from one another. And they're hidden in the jungle all across the Mayan Peninsula, named for its ancient inhabitants, but you may also know it as the Yucatan Peninsula. We're going cenote diving.
The exploration of the cave systems in the Mayan Peninsula started in the late 70s, early 80s by Mexican divers and also by cave divers coming from Florida, and slowly start to build up that cave diving community, and explorers started arriving from all over the world.
4 decades later, I'm one of those explorers checking out the cave systems and cenotes with local dive instructor and cave diver Jose Patron. The only place in the entire world that is like this. Cenotes, by the way, is a term for natural pit or sinkhole resulting from the collapse of rock, usually limestone, that exposes groundwater. These cenotes and cave systems are unique because of the history of how they were formed in the Yucatan Peninsula, remnants left over from an asteroid impact that hit this area about 65 million years ago. You know, the one
that was the main cause of extinction of the dinosaurs. This also transformed the peninsula into what it used to be a coral reef area, into what we see today as a karstic area. So it took a very long process for it to become from a reef to a karstic area. And what we see today over here in the peninsula, it's a very big system of dissolution caves.
Each of the 6 cave systems I'm diving in are completely different from each other. This particular cave system is an ancient coral reef, but there's more than just rocks to be observed. Human remains have been found in several of the caves, including the oldest ever found on the continent, dating back to more than 13,500 years, not to count the Mayan pottery and the fossilized remains of what can only be described as a...
It would be the prehistoric sloth.
Despite what we found and what I can show you with a camera, there is so much of this area that has not been explored.
I would say probably about half of the peninsula it's been explored in terms of its cave systems. Currently there is over 10,000 different cavern entry points in the peninsula that have been discovered and registered. And there is about 1,600 kilometers of underwater passages that have been explored, mapped, and marked. So there is still a vast amount of places to go out exploring. And I think that's why this area is so important for cave diving, not only in terms of the beauty that you can see inside of the caves, but also about the history of the planet itself and the animals and events that have happened in the peninsula all over these years.
Now at this point you've seen a little bit of my dive footage from all 6 cenotes, but let me take you with me on an adventure through 2 of my favorite. We're starting our 2nd day of cenote diving. If you don't know already, this is Travis. Travis has been the man behind the camera and he has been getting the most incredible shots. I try to avoid using my GoPro when I'm down there so he can get the cool shots and you don't just get this footage of me like, oh, look at all these crazy cool things. But this is cenote
Angelitas.
Angelitas. You can see there's already some divers down there. That's what these bubbles are. And we too are going to explore. And what's really cool about this dive is apparently the hydrogen sulfide cloud is one that we can not only go into, but we can come out the bottom of and then go back through. Really, really neat stuff. I mean, is this not completely trippy? Maybe a scene out of a Halloween flick? That river of smoke is the hydrogen sulfide I mentioned, a layer of gas from the decomposition of organic materials that sits right around 120 feet and is only about 10 feet thick. From the top of the cloud, it's daytime, but watch as I descend. My dive computer goes crazy, letting me know my timetables and gas levels. And then the cloud goes from white to yellow, and the smell of rotten eggs is permeating my mask. Underneath, at about 130 feet, it's like a night dive, and you can see the decaying leaves and trees that are helping create the cloud above. And the swim up is just as mind-blowing. If you thought that was cool, let me share with you another place. This is Takmaha, and that mirror-like reflection is called a halocline. That's where fresh water and salt water meet. And when I mix them with my hand, yeah, you see the view becomes distorted. And then there's Cenote Zapote.
What I would consider to be my favorite of the 6 cenotes we did would be Cenote Zapote, which is Hell's Bells. And the reason for it is the amount of unknown stuff that there's still in this cenote in terms of the research that's been done in the organic speleothems or in the belt-shaped speleothems, which we know are completely different from the other group of speleothems that are of mineral origin. So I think it's not only a very interesting site in terms of science, but it's also a very interesting site in terms of what you can see as you experience. It's a very overwhelming feeling of being somewhere else.
This is one of the only places in the entire peninsula where these bell-shaped speleothems exist. Scientists are not sure why, but unlike the stalactites found in every other cave, they're continuing to grow. Scientists believe it has something to do with the microscopic shrimp in this particular cenote. But these cenotes are for more than diving. They're also an oasis for swimmers, a safe haven for the lives of fish, and even a friendly crocodile named Ponchito. But this is where I tell you that these cenotes and cave systems are being heavily damaged and polluted, largely due to the growth in tourism in this area of Mexico, which is near Tulum.
The water testing, of course, it will come up sometimes with an increased amount of parts per million in human feces, or even drugs like cocaine or ecstasy, or this type of drugs that are commonly used by the youth that come and party, and that eventually end up in the waste and eventually end up in the cenotes. So the reason for water quality control to find this type of illegal substances or waste, it's quite common, unfortunately, in certain areas. That doesn't mean that every cenote you go to is going to be polluted, but it does mean that certain areas and certain cenotes are suffering from more pollution than others.
Tulum was once just a simple fishing village, but now it's a tourism destination hotspot for Americans. And according to Tulum's tourism agency, before the pandemic in 2018, Tulum ended the year with approximately 2.3 million visitors and with 100% occupancy of its hotels, a growth trend that continued up to and through the pandemic. Tulum is an example of a city in this area which is growing faster than it can keep up. And the environment is what gets sacrificed with uncontrolled developments that include building hotels near cenotes to use as sewage dumps.
But unfortunately, throughout many times there has been developments that they have basically just drilled holes into the cenotes, and then they've been disposing waste over there. This is a practice that it's not fully common everywhere, but it's a practice that is still going on, and that we find that it's affecting a lot our bodies of water over here. I think it's a very long-term impact, what we're going to see. So I think that little drop of waste coming into our cenotes for every day and then every year, maybe we cannot perceive it day by day, but it's something that eventually the people that will try to enjoy these places in 100 years or 50 years are not going to be able to see the same things that we're seeing today. So we think that by pushing the industry of tourism to be more focused on the nature and the family, we will be able to reduce the amount of pollution and to actually be able to be wiser in how we want to develop our cities for the future.
As a visitor, you can make a difference simply with where you choose to stay and what you choose to do. That's the only way to fight these uncontrolled developments.
My message to anybody that comes down to the area would be to try to dip a little bit more into the culture and the nature of the place. I think it's much more than sand and party. This is what it's usually promoted. But as you can see, there's beauty in the jungle, there's beauty out there in the jungle trekking, in the cenote diving, in the ocean diving, in the archaeological branch, in the going out to little towns to really know indigenous people. There's so much to see and do over here.
And with so much to see and do, there's that much more to protect. Because as you've just seen from above and below the cenotes, there's no place in the entire world quite like the Yucatan Peninsula.